Hello, everybody, or the one person that watches this video. Um, I remember when I was and I actually do this video for my children, Paxton and Ireland, and I put these videos in a file for them to watch and hopefully to have in the future that they can check in on and look at me and, not necessarily look at me, but of course learn the truth about who God is and who they are. So I do it for them, and I put it on YouTube just in case someone will come around and watch. But if you're watching, I I appreciate you. And man, to find my videos, you must be someone who is in search of the truth, because the truth is hard to find, and it is disguised in this world. The popularity and the pomp and the excitement of the lies is what people gravitate to. The truth is hard to find, but this is truth. This is truth that comes from Scripture, and there's no doubt about that. And you can check it with Scripture, and you'll know it's truth. But I remember uh, when I was a Christian, a young Christian, I was in my early 20s, and I was struggling with sexual sin. And I went to the church and was in a small group and did all that. And, I was asking for help, you know, with this type of sin. And, one of the guys, probably well meaning, but he said, "Oh, you should read the book of Proverbs. And, that'll set you right." And I've read the book of Proverbs many times, and all the book of Proverbs does is tell you that you should do the right thing, but it doesn't tell you how to do the right thing. That's great. Great advice from a Christian when you're struggling with, and I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to honor God. So I'm seeking help, and all this guy gives me is basically tells me that you should do the right thing. That's what you should do. You should do the right thing. Okay, yeah, I want to do the right thing, but I'm struggling with it. I'm a human being. But all he said and all Proverbs says is do the right thing. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It's hard. It does make sense. Yeah, you want to do the right thing, and of course, righteousness is important. In Old Testament times, of course, understanding what Jesus Christ did is that we give up on our righteousness and understand that we cannot attain that righteousness and trade everything that we are for everything that Jesus Christ is. And that's accepting the righteousness of God as opposed to creating our own self-righteousness, which is the greatest sin in Scripture. But reading Proverbs, I did come across some very interesting scriptures. And in Proverbs 8, here, wisdom personifies itself. Personification means it gives human qualities to something that's not human. So wisdom is talking here. And what wisdom says is that wisdom was created. Of course, wisdom is personified, so it's saying I. But where there is no abyss, this is verse 24 of chapter 8, I was travailed in birth. Wisdom was travailed in birth. When there were no springs teeming with water, ere the mountains were sunk in place, before the hills I was travailed in birth. So wisdom is saying that I, being wisdom, was travailed in birth. Before the foundation of the world, before hills were formed, before waters were formed, before anything, God created wisdom. And wisdom was travailed in birth. The definition for travail is painful or laborious effort. So God created wisdom, and it was a painful effort. Wisdom was birth. It was travailed. It was birthed. We know what birth is, Ask any female that has given birth. It's painful. It's hard. And wisdom here is saying, in its personification, that it was hard to be created. And this, I believe, is because it was hard for God to create wisdom. Why? Why is wisdom so painful? And this is why. Because Isaiah 45:7, God created evil. Ecclesiastes 1:13, God gives humanity an experience of evil to humble it by. It's God that created evil. And God has subjected evil into us and to everything that we do. Everything around us is evil. Look at the world today. It's evil. Evil is around us. Yeah, there's some good, but evil seems to superabound, and eventually evil catches up with every one of us. So why was wisdom hard? This is why. Because God created evil, and he knew the pain that it was going to cause on each and every one of his children. God abhors evil. He abhors it. But he knew in his wisdom, and this is why wisdom is so difficult, God knew that the greatest possible joy that any human being can get is by truly understanding the depths and despair of pain and sin that can come to them. If they don't experience that pain and sin and evil and horribleness, then they won't fully understand the joy, the love, and the everlasting life that they're going to enjoy for all eternity. So God hates evil. He hates putting his children through pain. But the difficulty of birthing wisdom is understanding that the greatest joy and the greatest character and the greatest everlasting life wouldn't be possible if you didn't experience evil. You can't enjoy the depths of God as much unless you are subjected to the depths of Satan. So knowing the depths of Satan, evil, and pain, then we know when we're all done with that and evil is destroyed, like Jesus will one day do. He destroys death, he destroys evil. Once that's all gone and we have a knowledge of it and we've been through it, our individual pain will be brought to an experience of unimaginable joy for all eternity that we couldn't have attained without going through that specific evil that God placed in our lives. And that's wisdom, because we don't understand it. We think that, oh, God created this perfect world and then evil came in and Satan came in and destroyed it, and now God's on plan B. No, God created evil to be part of the creative process to make us into the greatest, most joyful beings that we can possibly be when this world and this age is done. God uses it. And that is why God says in Isaiah chapter 40, who gauges the spirit of Yahweh, and who is informing him as a man of his counsel? With whom does he take counsel? And who is giving him understanding? In other words, who is explaining things to God? Who is giving him understanding? Who is teaching him judgment's path and teaching him his knowledge and is informing him of the way of understanding? Or who gives to him first, and it shall be repaid to him? What this says, and Paul reiterates it in Romans, is that you get nothing that you don't first get from God. So it doesn't matter whether it's faith, whether it's good works, whether it's evil deeds, whatever it is, you can do nothing apart from God. God gives you faith, and then you give that faith back to him. If you're an evil person, God gives you the evil, and then you give that evil to him and to the world. It's all part of God's plan. He created evil for a specific purpose. But these scriptures and these verses kind of get me thinking, like when I question God, like, why is there so much evil in this world? Why can't I do this? Why am I evil? What purpose does this serve? Well, God is kind of telling you here, where were you when I created the world? Where were you, like he told Job, when I stopped the sea where it stops so dry land can appear? Where were you when I built the foundations of the earth? Where were you here when I created wisdom and figured out the greatest possible existence for humanity and the greatest possible joy that they can imagine? And that greatest possible joy comes from going through an experience of evil that I created. How dare you, who are a mere human being, question my wisdom that I birthed, that travailed to be created? It was hard for God to create this because he knew and he went through every possible aspect of creation. He didn't just throw it out there and then the devil came in and snatched it away from him. He went through every possible scenario of creation. I'm sure he went through, just creating everything perfect and good for all time. But as he ran that through and as he used his wisdom and birthed wisdom, he realized that human beings could not attain the greatest possible joy unless they understood the opposite of that joy first, which is evil. And it killed it, and it hurt God to inject evil on humanity, but he knew that was going to build the greatest joy and create the greatest creatures imaginable because they went through that experience. That's God. That's difficulty. That's travailing. And God figured that out before any of us were born. And then we question it. And we continue to question it because we're human beings. But it's God that set this in place, and he thought it through. Every detail of every single one of our lives and the specific evil that comes into our lives was planned and travailed and painfully created because the greatest possible joy for each and every one of us could not be attained except through that experience. And just another verse in Proverbs, there's a lot of them, chapter 20, verse 24, a master's steps or a human being's steps are directed by Yahweh. How then can anyone understand his way? So God plans our way. But in chapter 21 of Proverbs, it says, like rillets of water in the king's heart, in the hand of Yahweh, wherever he desires, he directs it. Every way of man seems upright in his own eyes. Yet it is Yahweh who gauges the heart, that controls the heart. It is Yahweh, it is God, if you pay attention to these words, that directs the heart in any direction that he wants. He redirects every heart in the way he wants. And if you read scripture, evil thoughts come from the heart. Good thoughts come from the heart. So God manages it all, and he can change a heart. He created the heart. He formed our inmost being, and he creates our hearts, redirects our hearts to believe, think, and do everything. It's all up to him. And he directs it because for each individual human being, he has a specific plan, that whether it's good acts or evil acts, that he's going to turn that into the greatest possible joy for those around him and for those specifically dealing or committing those evil acts or good acts. So it's God that controls the hearts. It's God that controls every step that we take. And he created an existence where the end game is that all will be with God. that God will be all in all. He'll fill every one of his creation, every one of his creatures with all that he is. Because of the death, entombment, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, the end game, after evil and death is destroyed, is nothing but joy, and a greater joy, a joy that we can't even imagine, can't even fathom. But that joy is made greater because we had to experience evil, sin, and death. So evil, sin, and death shapes us. Jesus Christ gets rid of all that. And when all that's gone, all that's left is the new creation that God purposed from the very beginning. And it's joy and love unimaginable for every one of his creatures because they went through that evil, because God birthed and travailed to figure out the greatest plan in wisdom for each one of his creatures. I sometimes think that God lived every single life of every single human before he set creation in motion, to experience the pain and then to understand how that joy will be birthed from that pain. We have a God that can relate to us, that knows everything about us, that created us, and there's no chance that we won't have the greatest joy imaginable. It's unimaginable. But God started this process from the very beginning. It's his wisdom that came up with the greatest plan that there is. And someday we will all know the truth of that plan and the wisdom that brought it forth.